Dave Hodgson, The Daily.
Say hi, Dave.
Welcome back to the show. And earlier on the show, we had a former SAS commando on, and now we have a karate champion on. And so it's very manly today. Good afternoon. You're live on TRE. How are you?
Hi, Dave. How are you?
Now, listen, we'll get Scott. Brilliant to have you on, of course. And just tell us, Scott, how you originally got into karate. What was that for you?
Yeah, sure. It was when I was 5 years old. I grew up in Liverpool, and when I was 5, my best friend wanted to do jiu-jitsu, which is another type of martial art, and he wouldn't go alone, so I was dragged along, and after a couple of classes, he quit, and I continued, and that's when my love of martial arts started. We moved to Yorkshire when I was 11, and that's when I started karate, because it was the only martial art club in the area, so yeah, since 5 years old.
I remember doing judo when I was a child. Did you ever do judo?
No, it's something I never got into. Jiu-jitsu is a little bit similar, but I quickly went to karate, and I've never really looked back.
And what would you say is the major difference between karate and, say, jiu-jitsu, then, for instance?
Well, of course, at a really higher level, there's no real difference, but, you start at different points and try to get to the one destination. But karate is mostly at the beginning, kicking, punching, striking, whereas jiu-jitsu and also, of course, judo is more throws and locks and that type of thing.
Yeah. And so how old were you when you first started with karate?
Well, I was 11 so we moved to York, and like I said, I didn't really know that much about martial arts, and the only club that they had was karate, and I thought, karate, jiu-jitsu, it's all the same. So I started at 11, yeah.
And so you progressed, I mean, were you quite quick at progressing through the belts, or how?
Not really. My instructor at the time kind of wanted me to take it easy, take my time. So I started at 11. I got my black belt at 17. So it took me about 5 years, 5.5 years. And that was the minimum you can do it is 3.5 years. So it was a little bit longer than average.
And so is that as high as you can go, black belt in karate? Is there any way above that?
Yeah, absolutely not. There's each black belt is called a dan or a diploma. So first dan is the first black belt, and it goes right the way up until 8th dan. And at the moment, I'm 6th.
So, right. So you're there. You're in the UK. You're doing karate. After 5 years, you reach black belt. How on earth do you end up in Japan?
Yeah. Well, Japan is, of course, the mecca of karate and most martial arts, Japanese martial arts. So there's always a kind of mystique about what happens in Japan and the training. And I met a guy called Richard Amos who was living in Japan in the 90s, and he came over to England in 91 and was teaching with what would become my instructor. And he moved like the Japanese, spoke perfect Japanese, and I thought, I want to be like him. And I found out then that he was doing the instructor's course, and I found out about the instructor's course. So it was always a kind of secret plan of mine to go.
And you find yourself competing at a very high level, don't you? So, there's one in particular where not many foreigners at all have ever really succeeded in it. So you're in quite an elite class.
Well, yeah, the competitions are, there's the World Championships, which is, of course, all world countries compete at, but there's the All Japan Championships, which is kind of very special, so the Japanese, and I competed at that when I was on the instructor's course. But I guess the instructor's course was the one that there's not that many foreigners that have ever done it, so that was the kind of the highlight of my career when I was over there.
And what kind of level of discipline are we entering into there to get to that kind of level and to succeed at that level?
Well, yeah, it's the ultimate extreme. I heard you mention that you had an SAS commando on the. Yeah, I mean, it would be maybe considered the kind of special force training of the martial art world. It's been running since 1955, and only about 120 people have graduated from it. It's a 2-year course, and out of those 120, only 6 have been foreigners.
Wow, and how were you treated then as a foreigner? You must have stuck out a little bit, like there's the Englishman in the corner, there he is. So how were you received by the rest of your Japanese counterparts?
Well, it was certainly an uphill struggle. The Japanese are. I love Japan. I fell in love with the country as soon as I moved there, and I would protect it and defend it as much as I can. But Japanese people are wonderful, but when it comes to the core of their society, the core of their culture, which is, for example, like the martial arts, they are very protective, and they feel that maybe they are the the holders of the tradition. And it's for a foreigner to come in and speak the language and move like they are and try to achieve the level that they are achieving, it kind of can be a little bit uncomfortable for them. And so, often I felt that during training.
And again, the book obviously must touch on this, and more than just the karate, but you fell in love with the country and its culture and its language completely. I mean, the book is kind of like, Lost in Translation meets kind of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence meets Karate Kid. There's lots of things going on, but ultimately it's the love of the country that I want to show, and also the way that people can adapt and cope with living in a situation that they're completely not used to, that expat community. And I mean, are there lots of British or English-speaking people in Japan? I mean, did you find yourself surrounded by English speakers anyway?
Absolutely. There's a huge expat community in Japan, but when I initially went there, then of course I was surrounded by that. But the longer I spent in Japan, the less connected I was with them, simply because my life was going in a direction that they didn't understand or really have any sort of interest in. So by the end of my journey, I had almost no contact with the expat community. And
so I suppose that to some degree, speaking Japanese, your culture must have been all Japanese completely then at some point.
Yeah, by the end of my journey, I had friends, and I had friends, and my instructors and my seniors and juniors were all Japanese. No one spoke English, and I was completely immersed within the culture. Which I was going to say, which to this... Go on, sorry.
No, I'm going to let you go on.
I was going to say, which still to this day I miss dreadfully. I mean, when you live, I'm sure many of your listeners, live in that expat community, you become part of that community, and then to suddenly leave it, it's sometimes difficult,
It's difficult sometimes for me living here in Spain to actually make the effort to integrate into Spanish culture and not become just part of an expat culture that we have here in Spain. And that's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very alluring, the expat community. You kind of live in this microcosm that is comforting, and you are kind of a big fish in a small pond sometimes. I mean, certainly I found that initially when I was in Japan. But I think for me, the rewards of really immersing myself in the Japanese culture were far more beneficial than the hardship.
And how about learning the language? How long did that take, and how intense was it?
Yeah, it's like how long is a piece of string? It's really difficult. I'm sure, like speaking Spanish, learning Spanish. At what point do you think, oh yes, I'm good enough? I remember, after a couple of years, I was out with some friends, and they were all Japanese speaking, and I remember thinking, wow, no one's speaking English here. No one can speak English here, and I thought, oh, maybe now I can communicate. But still, that was 2 years in, and I spent another 3 years still every day thinking, oh, what did he just say then? What was that word? So, it was an ongoing battle. It's
a lovely place to arrive, though, when you feel competent enough to go out. I mean, I went out with a bunch of Spanish people the other day, and it was just me on my own with these Spanish guys, and we were out for an evening, and it was kind of scary, but kind of reassuring that I was understanding what they were saying, and if not always able to respond fully, but just having that place where you feel a bit more at ease, that you don't feel so foreign anymore.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of environment where maybe a few glasses of wine, maybe that relaxed company, and you can just ease yourself into it. And especially, I think English speakers, they never get used to thinking or speaking a foreign language because we're so surrounded by English everywhere we go. But for an English speaker, I think it's vital to just relax into the flow of the conversation and just listen to what you can listen and understand what you can understand.
Yeah. Now, the book, of course, a great book, and you're talking about Japan in a loving way, and yet you had some opposition to it. I mean, back in autumn last year, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, that would be a kind of understatement, I guess. I sent the book to my instructors in the autumn last year for their approval, because obviously it was talking about personal things. I mean, the story, although it's the backdrop of the instructor's course and the backdrop of karate, that's really just the backdrop. It's about me and about the psychological effects of kind of extreme training and how you cope with that. But I wanted their approval. I wanted to make sure that they were okay. But just reading the first page, they instantly said, no, you cannot publish this. And I had a couple of months of intense negotiations, which eventually led them to say, absolutely not, you're not going to publish this. And I agreed. I said, okay, I understand, and for the sake of the organisation and the organisation that I'd built up in the UK and Ireland, I said that I would not publish it. But still, there were elements within the group that maybe didn't want me to even contemplate publishing the book.
Yes.
And they decided that they would suspend me for almost 2 years.
Without even publishing the book?
Yeah, I absolutely promised to not publish it, but they still, just for writing it, not for publishing it, but just for writing it, they suspended me for almost 2 years, and it meant that I couldn't work. I mean, I'm a full-time karate instructor. I've never done anything else. I have a family, and it just wasn't an option, so they effectively expelled me. So I left, I resigned, and have found my new path.
And again, talking about the practical side of not having any work and not having any money coming in, which is devastating, of course. But what about this kind of emotional link that you would have had to them as well? You know, this is what you poured your life and soul into. Yeah,
it's very difficult, and I mean, it's just another challenge that I've got to face. But everything that the Japanese have done and everything that the organisation as a whole has done doesn't surprise me, because I understand the mentality. I understand how they're thinking and the reaction to it. I think what surprised me is the organisation is worldwide, and the organisation as a whole, lots of Westerners, lots of people in Europe, lots of people in the UK, I live in Dublin, Ireland, lots of people in Ireland, have also reacted in the same way that Japan have, almost in compliance to what Japan have dictated, and capitulated immediately. And as Westerners and as kind of karate men, you know, we are Westerners, we are independent, free thinkers, and we're strong, we do karate, but they have followed the party line completely. Well, not all of them, and quite a few people have followed me, which is great and very supportive. So I understand exactly who my friends are, and understand exactly the people who haven't followed, why they've done that, and I just have to accept that.
What was their main bone of contention then? What?
So yeah, like you said in the introduction, they said that it was full of lies, and I hate to say it, but Japan has a way of rewriting history. They've done it quite a few times, and actually I said at the beginning, you know, the 6 people have graduated the instructor's course. Actually, there's more like a dozen, but only 6 are still recognized, and Japan has a way of just writing history to fit in with how they feel. And so the bone of contention was they came back and said that I didn't graduate the course, that I actually only did a year of the course, and that the book itself was full of lies about Japanese culture and portrayed the Japanese in a very negative way. And I don't think I did, and I certainly think that the vast majority of people who've read the book already don't believe that either. So,
well, from just reading synopsis and reviews on the internet and so on in my research, and that is that the book appears to talk very lovingly about Japan, and it seems to me that without knowing the situation fully, that they kind of missed an opportunity for promotion, really, for promoting Japan.
Well, I would be in complete agreement with you there. I mean, since leaving the organisation, I've joined another organisation which is headed up by Richard Amos, the chap that I mentioned right at the beginning. And we have done exceptionally well. Even in the last couple of months, groups, countries have joined us. And so we'll just try to build a sustainable organisation ourselves. But yeah, absolutely, if I'd stayed with the organisation and stayed with my instructors, I'm sure the book would have had a massive positive influence within the group.
And so, obviously, that's not mentioned in the book, of course. Is there anything in the book referring to that later on? Have you had to add anything in there or not?
No, I mean, the book finishes on the day that I left Japan. Yeah. So none of that is mentioned. But I've started writing a sequel. I'm going to call it Karate Clever, and just try to explain how I went from leaving Japan and moving to Ireland. And within a decade, I'd built up the largest karate organisation in Europe. We were the biggest by far in a time when many organisations have fallen by the wayside or imploded. We had done great things. So I want to explain that and explain the consequences of why writing the book would would affect Japan like it did. So yeah, that's my next project.
Again, they're not going to like the second book then, are they? That's for sure.
Well, I have less worry about that now. They have they unfortunately, by expelling me leaving, etc. I've had to cut ties, but that's a good thing as well. I can now be completely free.
And so I was going to ask you, what does that mean in reality for today? Are you still able to practice in karate clubs and so on? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a full-time karate dojo in Dublin. We have 500 members, and so I'm busy there. But also, I teach probably 40 weekends a year. I teach all over Europe. I was in Germany last weekend. I'm in Norway next weekend. I travel a lot. So although I lost quite a lot of that weekend work when the JKS, the organisation, threw me out, it has been replaced by an awful lot of other people who are interested in training with me. So, yeah, I'm as good as ever. It was a small blip.
Okay, well, that's a good way of looking at it, and I'm sure it's over the years it's been quite hurting. But I want to thank you for being so candid with us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
And we want to just commend the book to the listeners. Of course, it's Karate Stupid: A True Story of Survival. Great story and a great journey of your life, and look forward to getting you back on again for the second one. Then.
My pleasure. And people can go to karatestupid.com if they want to get more information.
Lovely. Thank you for joining us. Of course, thank you, Scott.